The river that swallows men. The water was darker than usual. Boon Carter felt it before he even saw it. That kind of darkness that carries secrets at the bottom, things that sink and never return to the surface. He had been riding for 3 days following the river, keeping to the high ground where the view stretched for miles in all directions. But something was wrong that morning. The silence was too heavy. Not even the birds were singing. That's when he heard the sound. A dull thud in the water. Then another. And another. It wasn't the sound of someone swimming. It was the sound of someone fighting. Losing. Dying. Boon dismounted quickly, his feet slipping on the wet stones of the bank. Through the mist rising from the river like ghosts, he saw the figure. Powerful. Fighting against the current with desperate strokes. But the river was stronger. It always is. The person was being dragged toward the rocks, stone teeth that tore apart anything alive that touched them. Boon didn't think. He just dove in. The cold water hit him like a punch to the chest. Every muscle in his body screamed to go back. But he kept pushing forward. The figure ahead was a woman, he realized now, but different from any woman he had ever seen in the West. Tall. Almost his height. Broad shoulders, muscular arms, moving with the controlled strength of a warrior. Her black hair floated around her like a banner in the current. The rawhide clothing was richly decorated with beads that gleamed even underwater. This was no ordinary traveler. Boon reached her seconds before the rocks. His arm locked around her waist, and he felt solid muscle, real weight, strength fighting to survive. She didn't panic when he touched her. Didn't push him away like many drowning people do. Instead, her dark eyes met his. And for a second, just 1 second, Boon felt he was being measured, evaluated. Together, they fought against the water to the rocky shore. When they finally collapsed on dry land, both gasping, Boon looked at her properly. She was standing before him. Water dripping from the leather, hair dripping, but her eyes showed no weakness, only calculation. She spoke something in a language he didn't understand. The tone wasn't gratitude. It was evaluation. Boon pointed to himself. Boon Carter. She placed her hand on her chest. Ayanna. The name sounded like running water, but there was something about her that made the hair on the back of Boon's neck stand up. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. This woman was important. Very important. And he had just saved her. But from what exactly? The night visitor. Ayanna moved through the camp as if it were hers. Didn't ask permission. Didn't wait for an invitation. Just started gathering firewood with precise, economical movements. But her eyes never stopped scanning the horizon, looking for something, or someone. When Boon offered dried meat, she accepted with a nod that could be gratitude, or could not be. They ate in silence as the sun died behind the hills, but when darkness fell completely, Ayanna became restless. She stood up every few minutes, looked at the shadows. Her hand went instinctively to the knife handle attached to her waist. Finally, she approached him. Spoke quickly in her language, urgent, insistent words. Pointed to herself, to the darkness beyond the fire. Shook her head vehemently. Then pointed to him and made a clear gesture. Stay. Wait. Before Boon could respond, she gathered her still damp belongings and disappeared into the shadows. He heard her footsteps for a few moments. Then, nothing. Just the silence of the wild night. And that growing feeling in the pit of his stomach. That feeling that something was very, very wrong. When dawn came, she was gone. The only proof of her existence was a trail of footprints leading north, and a single eagle feather placed deliberately beside his bedroll. Too perfect to be accidental. Positioned with clear intention. Boon held the feather up to the morning light. And that's when he heard it. The sound of horses. Many horses. Coming fast. He turned to the horizon and felt his blood freeze. They appeared as shadows against the rising sun. 12 riders. Moving in perfect military formation, but there was something ceremonial about the way they rode. Something that made every instinct in Boon scream. The man leading commanded attention even from afar. Older than the others, perhaps 50 winters, with silver threaded through still predominantly black hair. Scars marked his face and hands. Not random wounds. Deliberate marks of someone who had survived many battles. His clothing was both practical and ceremonial at the same time, decorated with symbols that spoke of leadership, of power, of authority earned through deeds, not birth. When the group stopped 20 feet from Boon's position, the leader dismounted with fluid grace. His dark eyes absorbed every detail. The camp, the horse, the weapons, and finally, the scrutiny was thorough, professional, like being evaluated by someone who could read a man's character by the way he cared for his equipment. "You pulled my daughter from the water." The words weren't a question. They were a statement, spoken in fluent English, with the cadence of someone who had learned the language well enough to use it as a diplomatic tool. Boon felt as if he'd been punched, not because it was threatening, but because it revealed how much this man already knew. "The riders of judgment." "Your daughter," Boon managed to say. The words seemed inadequate. The man took a step forward. Boon could see that his eyes carried the same intelligent intensity he had noticed in Ayana. "My name is Nastas," he said, and the way he spoke his own name suggested it carried weight in these lands. "Chief of my people. And you, Boon Carter, have done something that requires acknowledgement." The word acknowledgement hung in the air, loaded with implications that Boon couldn't yet understand. But something in Nasta's tone suggested this conversation was about to become much more significant than a simple expression of paternal gratitude. Nastas gestured for Boon to sit, transforming what could have been an intimidating confrontation into something more like a formal meeting. The other warriors remained mounted but relaxed their postures slightly. Though Boon noticed they maintained positions that would allow them to respond quickly if needed. "My daughter was not in that river by accident," Nastas began. "She was there out of duty, out of honor, because sometimes the most dangerous path is the only path that leads where we need to go." Boon leaned forward despite his caution. Every word Nastas spoke seemed to carry layers of meaning. 3 days ago, our scouts brought news of strangers moving through our territory. Men who showed no respect for the land, who took what they wanted and left destruction in their wake. My daughter volunteered to cross the river and discover their true intentions. The pieces began falling into place in Boon's mind. Ayana wasn't crossing the river for pleasure. She was on a reconnaissance mission. A mission that had nearly cost her life. "The current was stronger than expected," Nastas said. And for the first time, Boon heard something that could be vulnerability in his voice. "She is strong, Phil. But the river shows no mercy to anyone." Boon nodded, remembering how even Ayana's obvious strength had been no match for the churning water. "She fought well. But a few more minutes." "Yes," Nastas said simply. "A few more minutes and my people would have lost not just a daughter, but our next leader." The weight of that revelation settled over Boon like a heavy blanket. He hadn't just pulled a woman from the river. He had saved the future chief of what was obviously a significant tribe. "This creates what my people call a debt of balance," Nastas explained. "When someone saves the life of a leader, especially when that person risks their own life in the process, the debt cannot be repaid with simple gratitude." One of the mounted warriors said something in their language. Nastas nodded before turning back to Boon. "My men remind me that you could have continued your journey." "Many would have. The river was dangerous, the outcome uncertain. But you chose risk over safety. The price of belonging." Boon shifted uncomfortably. Any decent person would have done the same. "No," Nastas said firmly. "Many people talk about what they would do. Few actually do it when the moment comes. And even fewer do it for someone who is clearly not of their own people." The chief stood and walked to his horse, retrieving something from his saddlebags. When he returned, he held a bundle wrapped in soft leather. "This is why I came," he said, his voice taking on a formal tone that made even his warriors straighten in their saddles. "To discuss your reward." Boon's pulse quickened. The way Nastas spoke the word reward suggested it wouldn't be a simple gift of supplies or safe passage through the territory. "But first," Nastas continued, "you must understand that what I am about to offer will change your life completely. Once offered, it cannot be taken back. Once accepted, it cannot be undone." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of horses shifting, and the distant murmur of the river where it all began. Nastas carefully unwrapped the leather bundle, revealing an intricately crafted medallion that caught the afternoon sunlight. The metalwork was unlike anything Boon had ever seen, not the rough silver ornaments common to frontier trading posts, but something that spoke of ancient craftsmanship and deep cultural significance. This medallion has been in my family for 7 generations, Nastas explained, holding it so Boon could see the detailed engravings covering its surface. It is given only to those who have proven themselves worthy of our deepest trust and respect. Boon studied the medallion, recognizing that while beautiful, it clearly wasn't the complete reward Nastas had mentioned. But the medallion is only a symbol, Nastas continued, rewrapping it carefully. The true reward is what it represents. Acceptance into our tribe as a full member, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. The words hit Boon with unexpected force that in all his years on the frontier, moving from place to place without permanent ties, he had never considered the possibility of truly belonging somewhere. The idea was both appealing and terrifying. You would have land to call your own, Nastas explained. Protection of the tribe. A voice in our councils. He paused, looking at his warriors before continuing. And if you prove yourself worthy over time, the possibility of marriage to someone of appropriate standing. Boon's mind immediately went to Ayana, remembering her intelligent eyes and commanding presence. The implication in Nasta's words seemed clear, though nothing was being stated directly. But, Nastas continued, his tone becoming more serious, accepting this offer means leaving your old life completely behind. You would live as we live. Follow our ways. The messenger of chaos. Accept our laws. There would be no going back to the solitary existence you have known. One of the warriors spoke briefly in their language. Nastas nodded. My men remind me that we do not make this offer lightly. In 20 years of leadership, I have extended it only twice before. Boon found himself staring at the wrapped medallion, trying to process what was being offered. A home, a family, a people to belong to. You don't have to answer immediately, Nastas said, though his tone suggested this was not an offer that could remain open indefinitely. But you should know that our scouts report more of those strangers entering our territory. The ones my daughter was investigating when she nearly drowned. The implication was obvious. Joining the tribe would mean accepting not just the benefits, but also the dangers, and that's when he heard it. A distant scream. Desperate. Coming from the direction of the river. All the warriors turned instantly. Hands went to weapons. Nastas tensed like a stretched rope. And through the mist rising from the valley, came running a figure. Staggering. A child. Covered in blood. The child collided with the horses, clinging to the legs of the nearest horse. A boy. No more than 10 years old, blood was streaming from a cut on his forehead. His clothes were torn. His eyes, wild with terror. Nastas jumped from his horse and caught the boy before he fell. Spoke quickly in their language, urgent, comforting words. The boy responded between sobs, pointing back to the river, to the hills beyond. And as he spoke, Boon saw Nasta's expression change. From concern to something much darker. Fury. Pure and controlled. Nastas turned to his warriors. Gave short, sharp orders. Half of them immediately rode off toward the river. The others remained, forming a protective circle around the boy. What happened? Boon asked. Nastas stared at him. And for the first time, Boon saw something close to despair in those proud eyes. The strangers, he said, each word cutting like glass. They attacked one of our outlying villages. Killed the men. Took the women. He paused, took a deep breath, and burned the children alive inside the tents. The world seemed to stop. Boon felt bile rise in his throat. How many survived? This boy is the only one, Nastas said. His voice was calm now. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes before the storm. He ran 5 miles to warn us. Nastas looked at Boon, and in that look was an unspoken question. You asked how long you had to decide about my offer, Nastas said slowly. I think time just decided for us. He held out the medallion. If you ride with us now, if you stand by our side against these men, then you have already made your choice. And we will be your people. And you will be ours. Boon looked at the medallion, then at the bloodied boy, then at the warriors mounting their horses with deadly efficiency, preparing for war, and he realized this was no longer about choices or decisions. It wasn't about belonging or rewards. It was about something much simpler, much more fundamental, right and wrong, justice and evil, life and death. He reached out his hand, took the medallion, and placed it around his neck. "Give me a horse," he said, "and tell me where they went." Nasta smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator recognizing another predator. The Valley of Ashes. "Welcome to our people, Boon Carter," Nasta said. "Now let's teach these murderers what happens when innocent blood is spilled on our lands." But as they mounted, 12 warriors and a cowboy who had just become something more, none of them knew the truth. The terrible truth. The strangers weren't simple bandits. They were just the tip of the spear. The smell arrived before the sight. Burned flesh, charred wood, and something deeper, darker. The smell of mass death. When they broke through the tree line, Boon felt his stomach turn. The village no longer existed. Only smoking ruins. Tents collapsed into piles of ash. Bodies scattered like broken dolls. Some still holding weapons. Others holding only children. The warriors dismounted in silence. Without words. Because there were no words for this. Nastas walked through the destruction like a man in a trance. Touching faces. Closing eyes. Whispering names. Boon stood at the edge, feeling like an intruder in this pain. But then he saw, at the far end of what had been the village, footprints. Dozens of them. Leading south. And among them, lighter tracks. Women being dragged. Children stumbling. Prisoners. "Nastas," he called. The chief looked up. Boon pointed to the tracks. They took survivors. Something flared in Nasta's eyes. It wasn't hope. It was purpose. He gave quick orders. Half the warriors would stay to tend to the dead. The other half would follow the tracks. And as they prepared to ride, a sound echoed through the valley. Distant but unmistakable. Drums. Not the ceremonial drums Boon had heard in native camps. These were different. Military. Organized. Marching. "What?" Boon began. But Nastas was already mounted. His face a mask of stone. "The army," he said simply. "They used the strangers as bait. To make a village respond. To have an excuse." The realization hit Boon like a hammer. This wasn't a random attack. It was a provocation. A calculated massacre designed to start a war. A war the army could justify to the rest of the country. "How many?" Boon asked. One of the warriors, the one Nastas had called Grey Wolf, spoke in broken English. "Scouts count 200. Maybe more. Cannons. Cavalry. Infantry." He spat. "White man's flag." Boon looked at the 12 warriors around him. Then at the valley where 200 soldiers were marching. With artillery. With orders to kill. "We can't fight this," he said. "Not like this." Nastas stared at him. "So you suggest we run? That we leave our dead without honor? Our prisoners without hope?" "No," Boon said slowly. An idea forming in his mind. Dangerous. Crazy. But maybe, just maybe, possible. "I suggest we fight smart. Not with force. With strategy." He dismounted and crouched on the ground. Began drawing in the dirt. "The army is coming this way, through the narrow valley. It's the only way, right?" Nastas nodded slowly. "What if we didn't fight there?" Boon continued. "What if we let them in? And then closed the door behind them?" Grey Wolf frowned. "Close how?" Boon pointed to the cliffs on both sides of the valley. "Avalanche. Blockade. Anything to trap them inside. Then it's not 200 against 12. It's 200 trapped. Confused. With limited supplies." "The Canyon of Judgment." One of the younger warriors spoke in their language, his voice full of doubt. Nastas responded sharply. then turned to Boon. He says this is suicide. That even trapped, they are still many. Maybe, Boon said, but it gives the rest of your people time to evacuate, time to ask for help from other tribes, and time for, he paused, for me to ride to the nearest fort and tell them what really happened here. Silence. Then Nasta spoke, his voice low but clear. You would risk your life, your new membership in our people, to ride alone through hostile territory, and tell a story that white men won't want to hear. Boon met his gaze. You offered me belonging, said my life would become bound to yours, that your problems would be my problems. He touched the medallion on his neck. So yes, that's exactly what I'll do. For the first time since they arrived at the burned village, Nasta smiled. Then we are truly brothers, he said. Night fell like a shroud. No moon, no stars, just darkness thick enough to drown in. Perfect. Boon was positioned high on the southern cliff, looking down at the narrow valley. Below, he could hear the army, horses snorting, men talking, the metallic clinking of military equipment. 200 men passing confidently through the canyon, not knowing they were riding straight into a trap. From across the valley, he could see faint silhouettes of the warriors, positioned, waiting, each with hidden torches, each knowing that when the signal came, there would be no going back. Boon looked at the loose rocks piled behind him. Years of erosion had created an unstable wall of boulders the size of houses, held in place only by gravity. Balance. All they needed was a push. One big push. He checked the gunpowder Grey Wolf had given him. Enough to create an explosion. Not big enough to kill, but big enough to start something that couldn't be stopped. Below, the last of the soldiers entered the canyon. Boon waited, counting, giving them time to commit completely, to move deep enough that escape would be impossible. He lit the fuse. The explosion tore through the night. Not loud, but enough. The rocks began to move, slowly at first, then faster, then cascading down, an avalanche of rock and earth descending the cliff face like water from a broken dam. From the other side, the warriors lit their torches, pushed their own piles, and the valley filled with dust, rocks, screams. The sound was apocalyptic. When the dust finally settled, the canyon was blocked. Both sides. 200 soldiers trapped inside. With nowhere to go, Boon slid down the slope and found Nasta's at the edge of the blockade. It's done, Nasta said. Now you ride. And we hold. Boon looked at the blocked valley, at the men trapped inside, at the warriors around him. How long can you hold? Nasta's met his gaze. Long enough, or we die trying. There was no bravado in his voice, just fact. Boon nodded, mounted his horse, and started to turn when a figure emerged from the shadows. Tall, powerful, familiar. Ayana. She was dressed for battle now. Reinforced leather, bow on her back, knife at her waist. But it was to Boon that she walked. She spoke in her language. Urgent. Nasta's translated. She says you don't ride alone. The ride through hell. Boon looked at Ayana. Her dark eyes gleamed with determination. It's too dangerous, he said. Ayana responded in broken English. No paths. Don't. She was right. Boon knew the territory, but not like someone who was born in it. Nastas placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder, spoke low in their language. She responded firmly. Then he turned to Boon. She will save your life as you saved hers. It is decided. There was no time to argue. With every passing minute, the soldiers trapped in the canyon would work to escape. Boon and Ayana mounted and rode into the night. The first miles were fast, silent. Ayana led, navigating through paths Boon would never have found alone. Hidden trails between rocks, passages through canyons that seemed to have no exit. She moved with the confidence of someone who knew every stone, every tree, but then they heard it. Horses, coming fast. Behind them, patrol, Ayana whispered. Army, searching. Boon looked back, saw the torches in the distance. 5, maybe 6 riders. Ayanna pointed to a narrow crevice in the rocks. Hide. They guided their horses inside, squeezing between the stone walls. The horses snorted nervously. Boon covered his horse's muzzle with his hand. Ayanna did the same. The soldiers' voices grew louder. Closer. Saw anyone around here? Don't know. But the colonel wants these savages found. All of them. And the white man who was with them? Traitor. He'll hang along with the rest. Boon felt Ayanna tense beside him. The soldiers passed, their torches illuminating the rocks around them, but not the crevice where they hid. When the sound of horses faded, Ayanna turned to Boon. Heard, your people want you dead. They're not my people, Boon said low. Not anymore. Something passed through Ayanna's eyes. Recognition, respect, maybe something more. They rode until dawn, stopping only when the horses needed it. The landscape changed from desert to prairie, from prairie to wooded hills, and finally through the morning mist. They saw it, the walls of the fort, flags fluttering in the wind, soldiers in the watchtowers. How we enter? Ayanna asked. Boon studied the fort. The main gates were closed, guards everywhere. If he rode up with Ayanna, they'd both be killed before they spoke a word. You stay here, he said. Hidden. I go alone. Ayanna grabbed his arm. No, they kill you. Maybe, Boon said. But if we both go, they'll certainly kill us. At least this way, if something goes wrong, you can go back and warn your father. She wanted to argue. He could see it in her eyes. But she also knew he was right. Come back, she said firmly. Promise. Boon touched the medallion on his neck. I promise. He rode toward the fort alone, hands raised, no weapons in sight. The guards saw him immediately, rifles pointed, voices shouting, "Identify yourself." Boon Carter. I need to speak with the commander. It's urgent. An officer appeared on the walls. Carter? The man riding with the savages? I'm here to prevent a war. Boon shouted back. The massacre in the valley was a setup. You're being used. Silence. Then shouted orders. Truth in chains. The gates opened, but not as a welcome. Soldiers came out, rifles ready. They surrounded Boon before he could say another word. Dismount. Slowly. Boon obeyed, hand still raised. A sergeant stepped forward, ripped the medallion from Boon's neck. Look at this. Really went savage. Listen, Boon began. There's no time to, a rifle but hit his back. He fell to his knees. You'll talk, the sergeant said. But with the commander. And then with the rope. They dragged him through the fort. Soldiers stopped to watch. Some spat. Others just looked with contempt. Traitor, they whispered. Savage lover. Boon was thrown into a small room. No windows. Just a table. 2 chairs. And a man waiting. The commander. Older. Gray hair. Impeccable uniform. But his eyes were cold. Calculating. Boon Carter, the commander said. I've heard of you. Man with no past. No family. No loyalty. I have loyalty, Boon said, spitting blood. To the truth. The commander laughed. Truth? I'll tell you the truth. Savages massacred a village. Killed children. Now they're paying the price. Lie, Boon said. The strangers attacked first. Massacred an Apache village. Women, children, burned alive. And you know it. The commander's smile disappeared. Watch your words, Carter. Why? Boon leaned forward. Because the truth hurts? Because important men in Washington want these lands cleared. And you're in their way. Those strangers? They worked for me. Provoke the savages. Give us an excuse to intervene. Boon felt his blood freeze. You orchestrated everything? Orders are orders, the commander said casually. And now 200 of my men are trapped in a canyon. Because of you. Because of justice, Boon corrected. The commander stood. Justice? There is no justice here. Only orders. And you just signed your death sentence. Guards entered, dragged Boon outside. To an open courtyard. where a gallows waited, recently built, as if they'd been expecting this. A crowd of soldiers gathered. Some looked uncomfortable, others excited, all silent. Boon was pushed up the steps. The rope was placed around his neck. The hangman checked the knot. And as the commander began reading the sentence, a shout echoed through the fort. Urgent, coming from the walls. Balance restored. Attack. We're under attack. The commander turned sharply. What? From where? The answer came in the form of arrows. Dozens of them, flying over the walls, hitting guards in the towers. Soldiers ran to positions. Rifles fired, but the attackers were ghosts, appearing and disappearing among the rocks around the fort. Ayanna, she hadn't stayed hidden. She brought warriors. In the chaos, Boon felt the rope loosen. Someone cut it. He turned to a young soldier. No more than 20. Go, the young man whispered. This isn't right. I saw what they did to that village. Boon didn't wait. Ran through the confusion. Soldiers running in all directions. No one paying attention to an escaping prisoner. He reached the stables, mounted the first horse he saw, and rode for the gates, which were now open. Soldiers trying to get out to fight. Boon rode straight through them. Through the gate. To freedom. Ayanna appeared at his side, mounted on her own horse, smiling like a wolf. You promised to return, she said. I kept my promise, Boon replied, smiling too. They rode together, back to the valley, back to where it all began. When they arrived, they found Nastas and his warriors still holding the canyon. Exhausted, wounded, but alive. And on the other side of the blockade, soldiers beginning to retreat, confused by news of the attack on the fort, not knowing it was just a dozen warriors causing chaos. Nastas embraced Boon when he dismounted. Did you succeed? Better, Boon said. The commander confessed everything in front of me. And a soldier heard. Word will spread. And the army? They'll retreat. For now. They can't sustain 200 trapped men without supplies. And they can't explain the provoked attack when the truth starts to leak. Nastas nodded slowly. So we bought time. Enough time, Boon said, that I end the days that followed, the truth spread. The young soldier who freed Boon spoke up. Others joined him. Journalists arrived from back east to investigate. And slowly, very slowly, the tide of public opinion began to change. The commander was called back to Washington to answer questions. The strangers who survived were arrested. And the tribes received a temporary treaty. It wasn't permanent peace. It wasn't complete justice. But it was something. A beginning. Boon stayed with Nasta's people, learning their ways, their stories, their language. And over time, Ayanna taught him more than just survival. She taught him what it meant to belong, to truly belong. A year later, under the same tree where it all began, where Nastas first offered the medallion, Boon and Ayanna were married. Not in the white man's traditions, nor just in Apache traditions, but in something new, something that honored both. Nastas conducted the ceremony, his voice strong and clear. My daughter was saved from the waters, he said, and in return, she saved a man from drowning in loneliness. This is balance. This is the way. Boon looked at Ayanna. Her eyes still had that intensity, that calculation. But now there was something more. You saved my life twice, he said quietly. Once in the river, once at the fort. Ayanna smiled. And you saved mine. We're even. No, Boon said, touching her face. We'll never be even. Because this isn't debt. It's choice. She kissed him then. And the valley, that valley that had seen so much death and destruction, echoed with the sound of celebration. Of two peoples finding a way to coexist. Even if temporarily. Even if imperfect. Years later, travelers would tell stories about a valley in Apache lands, where a cowboy saved a warrior woman, and in return, found something more valuable than gold. Belonging, purpose, and a family he chose, not by blood, but by action. They said that on clear nights, you could still hear the river. That same river where it all began. singing its eternal song of current and stone, of salvation and choice, of lives that cross at the exact moment they must. And if you listened closely, very closely, you could hear echoes of something more. Children's laughter, elders' voices, and the whisper of the wind speaking ancient truths. That salvation comes in many forms. That family is defined by action, not blood. And that sometimes, just sometimes, a man with no past can find a future. In the arms of a warrior woman, in the heart of a people, and in the promise of a new dawn. The medallion that Nastas gave to Boon passed to their children, and their children's children. Each generation telling the story of how it all began with a rescue, and became a legend. The legend of two worlds finding balance. Even if for a moment, even if imperfect, it was enough.